The hosts feel it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to. Well, we've warned you. Hello, and welcome once again to the Frankencast. I'm the mad scientist, Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm joined as always by...
Ooh, I'm that friend that just got stabbed with this weird syringe full of odd serum. That is Eric Velasquez. My pronouns are also he, him.
I'm sure nothing bad will happen from that
serum.
Yeah.
Nothing bad could happen, right? So this week we're talking about Overlord.
Yeah. And I watched Overlord right when it came out, and I hadn't seen it since. And it was nice to revisit this. It's a really interesting film. It kind of is of a piece with the movie we watched last week with Frankenstein's Army, in that it starts as just a war movie, and then it sneaks up on you with the weird stuff.
Right. I love it. I love how creepy it gets. So it's this is just a war story, and then shit goes wrong.
Yeah.
It gets me every time.
This, I think we start out and we, the first shot is just, we see the ocean just full of warships with, planes flying overhead.
Well, I guess the first shot is we get, an old-style title card, right? Where it just says Overlord, and it looks like one of those films out of the 40s.
Yeah.
You know?
So then we kind of are introduced to our main cast, and it almost has a slashery thing, because we're in the hull of a plane. This is a paratroop plane. There's a bunch of guys here. You don't really get to know them very well, and then slowly you get whittled down to who you're actually going to get to know.
See, you say slasher, I immediately thought Aliens. This is an homage to Aliens, where we have all those colonial marines. And then, slowly, like you said, we get dwindled down to the main cast.
Yeah, it's there's a little bit of a hint of who's gonna matter. But at first I was I don't know if I need to remember any of these guys' names or not. And then slowly you start to be okay, yeah, this guy's gonna stick around, this guy's not.
Right. So we first get introduced to Boyce. We don't get his name immediately, but we get that he's nervous, or maybe not fully into the soldier mentality yet.
Somebody next to him asks for a stick of gum, and he goes to pull it out and drops it all over the floor because he's just shaky. And he also has some sort of necklace that he drops.
And that's when Tibbet picks it up, and of course we don't know his name's Tibbet yet, but he just gives Boyce so much shit for this little necklace.
And he's oh, is this your lucky charm? And Boyce is just just give it to me. Just hand it over. He's just not putting up with it. But yeah, it's really clear that Tibbet is the mouth. He's going to be the smart ass of the crew. And Boyce is, the reluctant soldier. He's been drafted, he's not here because he wants to be here for sure.
Right. Well, I don't think anybody wanted to be here, but yeah, Tibbet definitely took to it more than Boyce did. And of course, well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the cast. Because at the time, the majority of this cast, I would say, are pretty much no-name actors. But we've got a few that have come out, and at least Wyatt Russell, Kirk Russell's son, he's kind of become a thing, right? He is the U.S. agent, if you're a Marvel fan. He's starred in a couple other movies, or he's been in a couple other movies. He's kind of what's Clint Eastwood's son? Scott Eastwood. It's this is the second generation of those old-timey well, they're not old-timey actors, but the 70s, tough guy actors.
Yeah, and their sons are slightly more handsome, less grizzled versions of their dads, but they still do have a little bit more character actor quality than your average movie star.
It's like they've been bred for this, right? And then, of course, going back to Tibbet, he's kind of a that guy actor, you know? John Magaro? Like, what he was in the Umbrella Academy season 1?
Yeah, I think so.
Peabody.
And he generally plays like these kind of smart ass guys. I think he's in like The Big Short, and that Super Pumped show about Uber.
Right.
So, yeah, he just, he plays a lot of those kind of like,
he's
snarky guys.
Yeah. He was in the Many Fates of Newark. Like, which is definitely a throwback to the frickin' mob movies of the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and he was a young Meyer Lansky. So he's basically been doing a lot of gangster stuff now. Fair enough.
Yeah, that makes sense because he's just got that attitude.
Yeah. He's got that swagger. So we also get, just once again, this is Wyatt Russell, just as kind of a no-name, just a mysterious soldier carving airborne to end war on June 6, 1944, which that would have been nice, I'm sure.
Right. We get our sergeant who stands up and is kind of like giving the crew, like, here's what our mission is.
Played by Bokeem Woodbine, who's been a Spartan. What the hell else has he been? He's been everything. Like, wasn't he in Transformers?
He was in one of the Spider-Man movies, too, I think.
Homecoming. He was Shocker number 2.
And he's also, I just saw him recently, Netflix has a series about, like, the murders of Tupac and Biggie. And he's, like, one of the cops in that.
Yeah, Darren Dupree. Yeah, I mean, so he's kind of another that guy actor, but he's a little bit more famous.
Yeah.
It's like, you know him by name, but he's in a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So he tells them that, like, so our Wyatt Russell is sort of like the star of the show when we land. Like, he's going to be the one. We're going to be blowing up a church that was turned into a Nazi radio tower. When you get down there, treat anything he says like it's coming straight from my mouth.
Right,
like he's the boss.
Basically saying, I'm not going to be around for long, and he's going to be my number 2. So, all right.
Yeah. To like lean into so we know Nazis are terrible. He's like, why, why did the Nazis put a radio tower on a church?
Right.
And they're like, I don't know. Is it because it's tall? And he's like,
well, what he does is he's literally like having every member of the group, the main members of the group, like call out like what's going on. What are Nazis? They're bastards. What are we gonna do to them? We're gonna kill them. And then he specifically asks Boyce. Boyce was the one who said, "What are the Nazis?" And Boyce was just like, "Eh." He's like, "Bastards, Boyce, for God's sake!" And you can tell everyone's like, "This guy."
And he's like, so they turned a church into a war asset because they want to ruin everything that's good or something like. I think that's what he says.
Yeah, and the only thing you do to vassals is you become dirtier and nastier than they are.
Yeah.
Which I disagree with, but that's
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's the policy of any military is like, we've got to be stronger and meaner. But yeah, I definitely, feel the need to push back against that idea as being the only way to do things.
Right. And then we're also introduced to a random character named Grunauer who speaks German. So, okay, we have our translator here. Great. That's going to be awesome. Then we also have this kid named Chase, who's the photographer. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it already seems like Chase is on everybody's nerves. Like, nobody really likes him.
Well, he's taking pictures of everybody, and they're like, for God's sake, get the camera out of my face, man.
Yeah, we got shit to do.
Got to keep our head in the game.
Wyatt Russell, his character's name is Corporal Ford, and he's like a demolitions expert, kind of, but there's like rumors that he like did something bad. He's got a legend to him, like, I heard this guy's such a badass, he did all this terrible stuff.
He was in Italy and like killed a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
He was a last minute transfer because he was such a badass. They couldn't deal with him.
Right. And so, yeah, they start kind of getting prepared, like it's about time to jump. Shit's exploding out the windows. We're seeing other planes going down. Like, things are getting scary. Like, they're flying over enemy territory. Machine gun fire is shooting up through the floor of the plane. We get a couple guys who just get
Rex's house, and then we have this poor medic who tries to save him, and everybody's like, for God's sake, he's dead. He just got splattered on the roof. Yeah, so we're, like we said, we're already narrowing down to our
primary cast at this point.
Yeah. We also get that, like, Boyce is friends with this guy named Rosenfeld, who's like, fuck, man, I don't know what's going to happen if I get down there, because I'm Jewish and they're Nazis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's definitely, like, they're sort of like the scared guys. Mm-hmm. Like, they, they're not like cowards, but, like, people are treating them like cowards because they are just naturally afraid of a terrifying situation.
Because they have fucking common sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Which, I mean, I think that's part of being a good soldier is you kind of have to train that common sense out of yourself. Right. Which is why soldiers come back with PTSD, because they've had to dehumanize themselves in order to get their job done.
Right. Literally become a killing machine.
Yeah, and with these two, we see, like, this is why, they're not cut out to be good soldiers because they have maintained their humanity.
Right, they can't be good soldiers because they're good men.
Right, exactly. So at this point, they're all kind of, like, getting ready, they're jumping out of the plane, because, like, one of the engines actually explodes, and we get a couple other guys die, so it's like, we gotta jump now, like, the plane is falling from the sky actively.
Right, everyone's tethering themselves to the line. So when they jump out, their parachutes get set off. And, of course, Boyce being at the end of the line, we then see everyone behind him more or less get fucked up.
Mm-hmm. And Boyce's parachute does not go off, and he's falling, like, head first. Mm-hmm. And he's, like, frantically trying to grab it and pulls it, and then, like, 1 second later hits water. And it's like, man, if you hadn't landed in that lake, I don't think you had enough time with that parachute. Yeah. You would have been splattered on the ground.
Right, and clearly this is not a shallow lake, or he would have been splattered.
Mm-hmm. He has to cut, the parachute lines, and he barely makes it out of the water. Like, he's almost out of breath.
Right, he almost gets waterboarded by his own parachute.
Mm-hmm. Now he's alone, and he's kind of, like, trying to find some more of the, they kind of all just got separated as they, fell from the sky.
Yeah, so he preps his sidearm, which, it being submerged in water, I don't know, maybe it would still work. I don't know.
I thought the same thing.
It depends on the model, I guess, but I'm still iffy on that. Well, he doesn't have too long to think about it, because he immediately gets shot at from the tree line. Germans have already found him.
Yeah. And he manages to, like, he ducks down and runs and hides in the forest, and then sees the sergeant, who is surrounded by a bunch of Nazis. Mm-hmm. And he's about to, like, try to rush out and rescue him, and then Ford grabs him and is like, nah, man, like, he's already dead. Right. He's like, we may be able to help. And he's like, nah, no. Nah,
and here's the thing. Bokeem Woodbine being Bokeem Woodbine, he's like, listen, I'm at least going to go out saying some badass shit, right? So he's like, hey, did any of you all got any cigarettes? And, the Germans being assholes just snicker at him. And he's like, all right, well, it's about God. And then he just gets mowed down by the Germans.
Yeah.
So he's like, it's about damn time, I guess, so.
At this point, Boyce is like, okay, the mission's, fucked. And Ford's like, no, we have to keep going. Like, everybody... So the deal is, they have to knock this radio tower down so that D-Day can happen.
Yeah.
Like, this radio tower would stop the big invasion.
Right,
so
they would basically be able to spoil the plans and then rush all the Germans to the front line, the landing spots, basically.
Yeah, so, like, everything, basically, we're going to win the war by doing this one thing.
Right, which, that's silly, but okay. I mean,
yeah.
You have to have a movie for a reason. So we have to get to this checkpoint Ciel Blanc and, blow up the radio tower there.
So I think at this point they do end up coming across 3 more crew members, which is Tippett, Rosenfeld, and the photographer. What's his name? Chase.
Yeah. Well, they also have, like, a hillbilly guy, don't they?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Where does he go in this movie? 'Cause he just disappears. I just thought about that. Because this isn't Dawson. Because we then will get introduced, like, we see them, like, find Dawson, this Chase is like, hey, I've been sent to take pictures of everything going on, and then Ford's like, hey, let me see that camera you got there, bud. And he just, like, smashes it on the ground, because if any light came across this thing, it was going to reveal their position, right? And then I love Chase, because he then pulls out just, like, a old ancient... like a Polaroid camera.
Right.
But then, yeah, we do get Dawson, and they're talking about how the German translator Grunauer had been shot and hung from the tree. He doesn't even get shown getting killed. He died off camera.
Yeah, and then Dawson, it's one of the, like, it's that stereotype where he's like, I've got big plans. I've been writing this book, and as soon as the war is over, I'm going to get it published.
Blows up as he steps on a landmine. Damn. But, yeah, I mean, seriously. If you're in such a situation, I feel like it's the kiss of death to say, boy, I'm going to go home in 2 weeks, or we're having a baby, or, you know. Yeah. It's like, I have
2
plans.
weeks away from a retirement.
Yeah, I have plans in the future. It's time to die. Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, of course, Boyce is very upset about this, and Ford's like, if you don't want to end up like him, you need to focus.
Yeah.
And he's like, walk to me. The path I made is landmine free. We've got to be very cautious here.
Fix your bayonet, tap the ground a little bit, get your ass over here. And then he's like, Tibbet, get over here. And Tibbet's like, how the hell do I do it? He's like, tap the ground. Okay, how hard? Logical question. And Ford, of course, is like, you'll know. Well, for a few seconds you'll know, or a second and a half you'll know.
Yeah. And so then once they get through the minefield, Tibbet finds a weird mangled corpse of some sort of unfamiliar animal.
Yeah, it's like, is that a dog?
Yeah, which this feels like exactly we had this exact same scene in Frankenstein's Army. Like,
right, yeah, exactly.
Finding this monstrous corpse.
There's a lot that this is like very similar to. Like, you've got the weird church that's also like the Nazi headquarters. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of weird science going on behind the scenes. Who cribbed whose notes here?
Yeah, I mean, this came out several years after, so... And I think at this point, they don't know what to do with that animal. They're like, that's weird. And then they stumble across a woman walking through the woods, and they're like, oh, fuck, they don't know, what her deal is, so they have to chase her down.
Damn.
Yeah. So that they catch up to her, and she starts kind of like fighting them. They're not trying to kill her; they're just trying to figure out what's up.
Right, but she's not fucking around. She just swipes at Boyce. She's like, "I'm gonna knife you."
Yeah. And then he starts speaking in French, and that like calms her down. Mm-hmm. They end up finding out that she lives in the town. And they're oppressed by the Germans there. She's a French woman, and she's been out scavenging. Trying to find valuables on the corpses.
Right, for her family and for whatever, probably to buy her way out of trouble if the Nazis got a hold of her. Mm-hmm. But also, of course, because you can't have a World War II movie with a church without having an actual crucifix being like on the ground in a pile of rubble, right?
Yeah.
Situation to kind of signify we're in hell.
Yeah. So she's like kind of leading them through the village, and then we hear there's like a woman in a window who blows a whistle.
Fucking narc.
And a bunch of collaborator.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're out past curfew. Well, so I don't get shot. I'm going to squeal on you.
And so a bunch of Nazis come like swarming out, and they grab the woman. We'll eventually find out her name's Chloe, yeah. But it takes a while. But the soldiers all kind of manage to like duck and aren't seen. They see that she's sort of being interrogated by these Nazis, and I think they kind of like split up. Boyce kind of comes around a building and like rejoins with the rest of the crew.
Yeah, he sneaks through a trench, but he's also kind of watching her. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, she could squeal on them and fuck their day up, but she doesn't. And weirdly enough, like the commandant just kind of like, it's like he knows her and just lets her go.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then she catches up to them, like where they're hiding. So earlier when they were all talking, only Boyce could communicate with her because he could speak French, and so they were all. Everybody else just kind of had to go with what Boyce was saying. But now she appears, and it turns out she actually speaks English, and she was just testing them to see if they were trustworthy.
Fair enough. I mean...
Yeah. If you've been living in an occupied town for a while, like, it's a trust no one sort of situation.
Right. They probably heard a lot of bad stories about, the Americans, too. Right? Because a lot of that propaganda was spread around as well. Propaganda was spread around World War II, just in general, but, still.
Oh, yeah.
And it turns out they're going back to Chloe's house, and the only people there are Chloe, her brother Paul, and her aunt. Okay.
Does she mention then that her aunt's sick?
She's very sick.
And her brother Paul is, like, very young. Like, he's a kid.
Right. Well, he's also a scary fucking kid, right? Because, like, he sneaks up on Tibbet and has, like, a toy gun pointed at him. And he's like, Jesus.
And his relationship with Tibbet is really fun because, like, Tibbet keeps acting like he hates kids. And he's like, fuck off, kid, basically.
Right.
But he, like, grows to love the kid as the movie goes on. And it's very sweet.
Yeah, it's the best. And then, of course, when they get upstairs, Ford's like, they hear the aunt, and she's like making, I call them Gollum noises, the like that kind of stuff. And Ford's like, is she going to be a problem?
Yeah, and Chloe's like, she keeps to herself. It's fine. She's just not well.
Right. And then we get a cool, like, another Aliens scene where Ford's like, all right, I want all the gear on the table so we can inventory it,
They're kind of discussing, like, all right, how are we going to handle this? We're clearly vastly outnumbered. The first plan is, they're trying to do something where it's like, we're going to have a couple guys that are covering us as we try to climb the building and put the explosives on the outside of the church. And it's kind of like, but do we have enough firepower? Can we hold the Nazis off with just, like, 2 snipers? And it's like, I don't know if we've got enough or we can shoot fast enough.
We don't have to worry about that for too long because we then get interrupted. It turns out the Nazis have gone into the lady who squealed on Chloe a little bit earlier, and they're dragging her husband out. They're going to do something nefarious.
They just shoot him in the street.
No, well, they shoot her first. They shoot her in the head, then they shoot him and throw him in the truck. It's like, well, I guess that's what you get.
Yeah.
Don't narc, friends.
Yeah, and so they kind of continue to argue as that's going on. Like, we're not really sure what we're going to do. But, like, at this point, like, it's like Tibbet is like, that plan is not going to work. It's just not going to happen. And Boyce is like, listen, that's the mission. We got to do what we got to do.
Right.
And Tibbet's like,
oh, this shit. You're not even a soldier. And then we get to find out why they were giving him shit at the beginning. It's because he wouldn't even kill a mouse.
Yeah, there was like a mouse bothering stuff in the barracks, and he caught it and let it out, and then it came back in and
shit all over Sandra's pillow.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So we know Boyce is a great person.
Right. And so at that point, Tibbet and Chase, because they're like, we don't have enough guys to pull off what you're saying. We're going to go back out into the woods, see if we can find a couple more people. Maybe some other guys survived, and then maybe we can pull this off.
Right. Do a little scouting, if as it were. And then, of course, Paul scares Tibbet again, and he's like holding a baseball up at him with a catcher's mitt. Yeah. And he's like, what the fuck do you want, kid? And Chloe's like, he just wants to know if you want to play ball. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and he's just like, nah, I got stuff to do, kid.
Right. Come back when you've got a pool table and $5.
Right. And so, they leave, and then Boyce is just kind of patrolling the house and peeks in on Chloe's sick aunt, and she is beyond sick. Like, she looks like a zombie. Like, she looks
initially
horrifying.
She's not there. This is where we get one of our first jump scares, right? Because he's like, nobody's in here. Looks away, looks back. Oh, she's right there at the door.
She's like, it's like the hagsploitation thing. Like, she's like a decaying corpse that's walking around, basically. Like, they went all in on making her just look old and haggard.
Right. But we learned that the Germans did something to her in the church.
Yeah. Boyce is like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb her or whatever. And Chloe's like, come down, let's let me look at your wounds, because she did stab him when they were fighting in the woods. So she's like fixing her own damage.
Yeah.
And I think this is when she finally says, like, oh, my name's Chloe, nice to meet you. So we've gone this far without knowing who she is.
Right. And we as we get a couple shots of Tibbet and Chase kind of like going through the town and trying to hide from Germans, we also learned that Chloe did she say she went to America to become a vet?
I think so, yeah.
And of course, that's when we actually learned that Paul's name is Paul. So, okay, we've gotten everybody's name now. Great, awesome.
And she's like, how do you know how to speak French? Your accent's strange. And he's like, yeah, I grew up, like, my grandma was from Haiti. We lived in Louisiana for a while. So he's kind of got like a, Creole kind of French going on. Yeah.
And of course, she says, so there's no war there where you live? And it's kind of like, well, this is the 1940s, Louisiana. Not exactly, but kinda. just in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah. So she goes in, like, she's like, so yeah, there's some German doctor who's experimenting on villagers in the church. He believes that the church is, like, built over top of some, it almost sounds like ley lines or something. There's some kind of occult power.
Yeah, the ground has power itself, right?
Yeah, and so he's tapping into that for these weird experiments, which, Nazis messing with occult stuff is not only like a horror trope, but is like reality, like that they definitely were trying to find some ways to use occult magic.
Yeah. Fun fact, I literally did a research paper on the Thule Society. That's fucked up.
Yeah. There's you can get into some real deep dive stuff with this, like. But yeah, so at that point, the Nazis we saw earlier out in the street with the older couple, they knock on Chloe's door. Boyce disappears, heads upstairs. Chloe answers the door, but just the commander comes in. The rest of the guys stay outside on the stoop or whatever.
Yeah, and he's acting very familiar. Like, he starts to get undressed a little bit, takes off his jacket, and then he tucks up his collar for her to take off his is it metal or tie? I feel like
it's like an Iron Cross kind of like metal or something on on a ribbon.
Right.
And so she unclasps it and hands it to him, and Boyce and Ford are up in the attic looking through a crack in the floor, and they're seeing all of this play out.
Right, and of course she's looking up at them, and the commandant catches her, and he's like, I couldn't catch exactly what he's saying, but it seems to be the effect of what you looking at up there, and I think she's like, oh, it's just my little brother is knocking around up there.
At that point, we kind of get it more explicitly shown that they have a bit of an agreement that to protect her family, she is, it's like a sex for safety kind of thing here. It's a really terrible situation for her to be in.
Yeah.
And she's really, she's like, can please just not tonight. Can
right.
Another night, but just, I can't tonight. And he, instantly gets angry, as you would expect him to, because he's terrible.
Yeah. And of course, luckily, we get some diffusion as we see the ball actually drop at the top of the stairs. And it looks like Paul just let the ball slip. Oops. And then, of course, the commandant's like, hey, let me bring my boys in here to check that out.
Yeah, and so they could go, searching the house, and Paul sort of brilliantly manages to distract them so that they don't see Boyce and Ford.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, it's just this kid with a baseball.
Well, also, Boyce and Ford are kind of waiting if they take another step up the stairs, right?
Yeah.
It's if you spot us, we're just going to splatter your head across the wall. Because they've got their guns at the ready.
Mm-hmm. And so, the Nazis bring Paul down, and the commander's like, well, I'm going to just take him to the church and see what we can do with him, unless you do what I want. Okay, well, that's fun. By the way, this is going to get uncomfortable real quick, so essay warning now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, of course, what can she do? She agrees. Things kind of start going that direction where, he's starting to kind of try to undress her or whatever, and he's got her backed up against the wall, and then suddenly there's a gun to the back of his head. So, it looks like he's busted, and it's Boyce that's got him dead to rights. And so Boyce is just holding him there, and then Ford just walks over and just punches him and knocks him out. Yeah, well, he also goes through his pockets and finds this really cool lighter. Oh, right, yeah. And, kind of gleefully takes it, this is mine now. Right. So then... hoist him up. Yeah. They're talking about, we got to get Tibbet and Chase. They need to show up so that we can move on the tower. Mm-hmm. Do they both go, or does just Boyce go out to find them? Ford just basically is like, yeah, help me tie him up real quick, get a sack for his head, and then you go find Tibbet and Chase and bring him back here. Yeah, and so Boyce he sees a Nazi truck, and they're unloading a bunch of sick people. It looks similar to Chloe's aunt, people in some sort of weird state. And then they just set them all on fire with a flamethrower. Right, you just see the two Nazi flamethrowers come out and just... very brutal. Yeah. And of course, Boyce is like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. And he almost gets busted as a Jeep goes speeding past him. But that doesn't get him. He ducks down long enough. The German Shepherd is what spots him. Right. Yeah, so he's being chased by a dog, and then sees like a Nazi like carrier truck driving, and he runs up and jumps into the back of it.
It was the one that almost busted him. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's full of corpses. Yeah. So now he's just in the back of a truck with a bunch of dead bodies.
Oof.
And the truck goes into the Nazi base that's, like kind of built up around the church. There's, fences and everything.
Yeah, and somehow Boyce does manage to slip. He slips into the blind spot of the Jeep, which is, like, there's not really much of one, but somehow he does it. I don't know. It's a movie. We'll just go with it.
Yeah, this felt like, we talked last time about how that movie felt a lot like a video game. Mm-hmm. This one, for the most part, doesn't, but this scene definitely, you have the sneak mission in the video game where somehow you're in the shadows and you should obviously be seen, but somehow because video game logic, you're not.
Yeah, the only thing this movie's missing is Metal Gear.
Right. Yeah, so he's sneaking around in behind enemy lines.
He goes into the building, he goes down into the basement, and he's like, there's an organ in front of him, but he's also barred. Mm-hmm. So, he can't get out that way. And then he hears this weird, like, gurgling noise.
And, like, there's a wall with, like...
glory holes.
Yeah, basically, there's just, like, peepholes without... Are there even doors? I think it's just a wall, right?
Not on this side, there's not, yeah.
Yeah, and so he looks through one of them, and, it's, again, some sort of prisoner who's been experimented on, who does not look like, normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we hear a bunch of weird, like, meat smacking sounds, like... It's really weird.
Yeah, and so he kind of, like, keeps moving. Whatever's going on there is not good, and he ends up in a straight-up mad scientist lab. Right. There's a bunch of...
In the middle of the area, there's like some bubbling tar stuff. So I guess that's the ground, the magical ground.
Yeah. And then all along the ceiling, there are these weird bags that are full of liquid and other things moving around inside them.
Right. I basically wrote down, it's like amniotic fluid, and these are the literal amniotic sacs.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to the weird eel sack from the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein movie, but they're just small individual ones, and they also have zippers, which is the weirdest thing, like that the liquid's not
dripping through
leaking out of the zippers.
You gotta love a good eel sack. Anyway, but something in the sack moves and scares the shit out of Boyce. What the hell's in there? It looks vaguely humanoid.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, he kind of, like, unzips the zipper a little bit, and there's a man inside who's wearing, like...
a breathing mask.
I guess it's... Yeah, I'm guessing that's how he's breathing in the fluid, but it kind of looks like a gas mask. And he's like, help me. Boyce, obviously, there's nothing he can really do. So he starts kind of backing away, but he does see this tray with all these like perfectly lined up syringes with some sort of strange liquid, and he's like, well, I'm gonna take one of those. I don't know what's going on there, but might come in handy.
You never know, we might use this as a power-up later, who knows. But we also hear like a woman like crying out for help in French, and he's like, okay, and he sees she's like on a table or something through this like hospital screen. He removes the hospital screen, and she's missing something. She's missing most of her body. The only thing she has is head and spinal cord.
Yeah. Which, again, this kind of felt like the teddy bear lady from Frankenstein's Army.
Did it? Overlord ripped off Frankenstein's Army. It had to.
There's a lot of similarities. It's hard to deny.
We're calling you out, Overlord.
But yeah, so obviously that kind of scares him, and he starts... and, this head, obviously she was calling for help, so she's alive, even though she's just a head and a spine.
Yeah. And, of course, Boyd's like, fuck this shit, I'm out.
Yep. But then he bumps into Rosenfeld, who is, like, still alive. He's, like, attached to all these weird contraptions, but, is awake and alert.
Okay, I feel that there was a rewrite here, okay? Because Rosenfeld has an obvious head wound, almost like a bullet wound to the head, right? And like you said, he's attached. There's this like pipe that's going into his stomach. Which I feel that Rosenfeld was like Chase right? Later on, they didn't know what to actually do with Chase, so it was going to be Rosenfeld, but then they swapped it.
That would make sense.
We'll get to Chase. What happens to Chase later?
Yeah.
But yeah, so Boyce removes Rosenfeld, helps him get out. But we also see that doctor injecting a random soldier with that serum that he had. And the soldier just kind of convulses a couple times. And then I guess they either put him... Is that like cold storage like for bodies in a morgue, or is that an incinerator?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
One of those two things.
Yeah, this is like a scientist who's way far along in his experiments. Like, he's not yelling it's alive when it starts moving.
No,
like,
this is all old hat to this guy.
Yeah, I literally wrote old hat. That's so funny. Yeah, so they head out with this corpse, and Boyce like manages to get the tube out of Rosenfeld's side, which is like this weird needle that's very long.
Right.
And if you have any kind of needle trauma stuff, like, look away, because this needle is very long. Like, it's an intense needle.
Yeah. But Boyce decides, he picks up Rosenfeld and they get out of there, right? Well, he decides he's going to get out in the loudest way possible by kicking the shit out of this grate that leads into like an underground grotto. I love a good grotto. But anyway, they do manage to escape. They make it back to Chloe's house. And Boyce, man, I feel him in this moment, because I have had this ADHD like stream of thoughts just come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Because he's like, there's all kinds of shit out there. They have this serum and they have these guys, and it's like, I've been there, man. I know that feeling.
Yeah, and they're just like, stop, slow down. What's going on? Like, this is like obvious, like, it's like PTSD. Like, he's in shock. Like, he just saw so much fucked up shit, and now he's safe and like is processing all that shit that he just saw.
Right.
And he does show them the syringe, and so they're like, oh, well, we got a Nazi right here. We can ask him what the fuck's going on.
Right.
Obviously he's not wanting to give them anything useful.
Yeah, he just talks shit.
Yeah. So Chloe just fucking stabs him. She's like, I don't like, you've had your way with me for a while now, so I'm gonna do what I want to you now that I'm the one in a position of power, which good for her, obviously.
Right. And she's clearly ingratiated herself with Ford now, because he's like, I dig her style, and he starts twisting that knife.
Oh yeah, that's intense too. They've got him strung up to the rafters, and Ford is just like ready to just beat the shit out of him.
He goes to town on the commandant.
Yeah, it's one of those like, I've got you where I want you, and you're acting like you're too tough and that you're not going to say anything, but I'm going to win this one, I think is what he says.
Yeah, he literally says that. It's like, so that kind of tells us that he did not win in Italy. Whatever happened.
Yeah. And Boyce is like, this isn't how we do things, this isn't right. And Ford's like, did you not listen to what we said in the plane? Like, we got to be worse than them if we're going to beat them.
Right. If you want to beat them, you have to play as dirty as they do.
Yeah. So Boyce goes downstairs, and then a little bit later...
Well, he tries to stop Ford and gets his shit kicked in doing so.
Yeah.
And he's like, you go downstairs, boys.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not going to watch this anymore. And then a little later, Ford comes strolling down, and he's like, all right, so, let's discuss the plan.
Yeah, we got 60 minutes till they hit the beach. So we have to blow the tower in. So we've got the 1 hour countdown, right?
Yeah. So they're kind of talking, and Ford's like, hey, Chase, while we're discussing, why don't you run upstairs and bring the commandant down, because we're going to need him for the plan.
Yeah, he'll be collateral.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And because Chase is like a dumb kid, he goes up there he's like kind of acting a little like the commandant's like unconscious, he's like hanging there limp, and he's like kind of scared at first, but he's like, oh, he kicks him a few times. He's like, all right, yeah, he's out. And so then he cuts him down, and like instantly, like the commandant was faking, like, he's waiting for this moment.
Yeah. Did you hear those air quotes earlier when you said he was unconscious?
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. And so the commandant just kicks Chase's legs out from under him, somehow gets a hold of Chase's legs, and shoots Chase 3 times, point blank.
Yeah. And he still has the bag over his head, but like he shoots him point blank, and then just stands up and is like, he hears the men running up the stairs, and he's just firing wildly, but he can't, obviously can't see. Boyce manages to kind of like dodge him and knock him down, and like they all kind of like tackle him and get him back under control. As the yeah,
but also Chase has got 3 bullets in him now.
Yeah, and it's one of those moments where like he's definitely gonna die, but he's like, "Am I?" And they're like, "Yeah, you're looking good. You're gonna be fine. Just we're gonna put some pressure on it. You'll be all right."
Don't let me die. Let me have my camera.
Yeah, and they hand him the camera so he can hold it as he dies.
Poor Chase.
And everybody's kind of mourning in there, and then Boyce just jabs him with the syringe.
I mean, he does 2 + 2 = 4, right? This brought somebody back to life for a moment earlier, so it'll do. Chase will be fine.
Yeah, and he doesn't check in with anybody to see if they think this is a good plan.
No, he does not.
And Chase wakes up and is like kind of confused, and he's like, "Give me some water." And they give him a can. Thirsty. Yeah, they give him the canteen, and he just crushes it like it's like a soda can.
Yeah, that's weird. And of course, Tibbet doesn't miss a beat. He's like, "That's not the only thing that's fucking weird."
Yeah. And then like immediately his veins start turning dark and they get like thick and bulgy, and he's like twitching kind of weird.
He's talking about how hot it is.
Yeah, and then it's like he's twitching so hard that like you can hear bones breaking in his body, and like his neck's bent at this crazy angle. Like clearly like he's turning into a monster before their eyes, and they start to kind of try to like restrain him, and he starts throwing them out of the way.
They try to talk him down first, right? They're like, I think you need to calm down, buddy. And he's like, my head hurts. He just runs and headbutts a post in half.
Yeah.
And then he convulses like that one guy did earlier, but he literally breaks his own neck backwards, where you see the bone jutting through the skin. It's gnarly as hell.
Yeah.
But it's also really cool.
Yeah, it really is. And so they just start shooting him, and like they think they've killed him, like they just fill him with bullets. And then he just stands back up.
Right. He's like, "What'd you do to me, boys?"
And so then this is kind of like the moment where Boyce is like, okay, I see that like sometimes you gotta play hard to like survive in this world. So
what's the one way to stop something for sure? You bash the fucking brains.
Yeah, so he just like beats his skull to a pulp, and it's like one of those things where like he can't stop, and the rest of the guys are like, he's dead, Boyce, it's fine, it's over, and they're like pulling him off of him.
And if you're skittish against gore, 1, this is not the movie for you, if we haven't already stated that. 2, you will get to see the squished skull of Chase.
Yeah. Yeah, this is probably the most gory moment in the movie.
Pretty cool. I don't know, there's a certain thing with a gunshot in the moment.
Yeah. True.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah. So the soldiers are like, what are you all doing? Like talking to the commandant, like, why did you make this? What is the purpose of this? And he's like, the 1,000-year Reich needs 1,000-year soldiers.
1,000-year soldiers. Fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he does, like, as all in the chaos of all this, he manages to slip out, goes downstairs, and grabs Paul as a hostage.
Bastard. And I appreciate how, like, once he gets to the very bottom and everyone's realized he's slipped out, like, and he's almost out the door, Ford gets ready to shoot him, but he just holds Paul up and like, goes, and just walks out the front door like a villain.
Yeah, and so then, like, the soldiers run out, and there's some Nazi soldiers outside, and there's kind of like a firefight. And the commandant's really just like, fuck this. Like, he just jumps in the Jeep and, like, takes off. He's like, I've got a hostage. I'm not dealing with any of this. And
well, he tries to. But, of course, we have Tibbet, who's basically the sniper of the group. And he just takes out a bunch of people. Then Ford pulls out his gun. And we see kind of profile of the commandant. And then blood splatter outside of his face.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
What did Ford do to the commandant? He surely will not look right after this.
Yeah. And so now that he's gone, Ford's like, all right, that's over with. We've got to go take the tower now. Like, we are running out of time. And Boyce is like, no, like, we've got to stop him. We've got to save the kid. We've got to stop whatever's going on in the basement of the church. Like, the tower is no longer the priority.
God bless Tibbet. He's a man after my own heart, because he effectively goes, ¿Por qué no los dos?
Yeah.
Why don't we do both?
Yeah, because, like, and this is like, I think, Boyce having had to kill Chase, now he's kind of like, he's got his strength. He's kind of grown a backbone. Because Ford just starts yelling at him, and he's like, "I gave you an order, soldier. You're doing what I say." And Boyce is like, "No, I'm not. Like, I know what needs to be done. I know the right thing to do here, and I don't care what you say."
And of course, once they all agree to it, Ford's like, we're probably not going to make it back from this, right? We're all going to die here.
Yeah, and they're like, "Yeah, well, we got to do the right thing."
And once again, Tippett being my boy goes, "You know what? If we make it back, though, it'll be so much sweeter on the way home."
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
This moment, I think the tension they're breaking. Now the group we have here is like a cohesive unit. Like they're fully working as a team. They all have each other's backs. They trust each other.
Well, they even have Chloe on board.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a whole crew. Okay.
Yeah.
So we got Rosenfeld and Tippett. They're going to act as anchors and basically as a distraction and just start shooting any Nazi they can, which I approve. And they're going to distract them long enough for Boyce and Ford and Chloe to sneak in and do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so then but the first part of the mission is the crew is still like in the woods talking, but Chloe is back in town, and she gets one particular Nazi's attention, and he's got a motorcycle, and he starts chasing her.
Yeah, this is basically the commandant's like first goon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so he's like trying to figure out, he's like, I got to catch you and figure out what's up. But then Ford and Boyce, they're waiting. This is the plan, and they take him out.
She's the distraction, right? And this goon tries to SA Chloe, but Chloe just starts laughing in his face because, like, you took the bait.
Yeah.
And the next thing we see is him riding back to town or to the base on his motorcycle. That's interesting. Why is his mouth tied up, Anthony?
Yeah, that's so good. So he the other Nazis like stop him, and they're like, "What's going on?" And he's like gesturing wildly and everything.
Right. And as they try to grab his the tape over his mouth, he moves his head away. He knows what's up.
But so they managed to pull the tape off of his mouth, and attached to the tape is a grenade pin. And the grenade is in his mouth.
Oh no. But wait a second, what just happened? Oh, hey, some dynamite just ignited itself. That's weird.
Yeah, so the whole fucking Jeep blows up, and like all the Nazis are right there.
Yeah, get them.
Yeah. So obviously that's sort of like the
main distraction. Right?
Yeah, it's like the catalyst for everything to go wild. So now like the soldiers are all kind of scrambling around. Tippett and Rosenfeld are up on hill.
Fire.
Tippett's like, sniping, and Rosenfeld's got like the machine gun. And yeah, they're just taking everybody out.
Yeah, you gotta love it.
Yeah, it's very satisfying. I mean, there's just nothing quite as enjoyable as watching Nazis get gunned down.
Get shot, yeah. I don't know what, it's very cathartic, is all I'm saying. But so then we have Boyce, Ford, and Chloe entering into the church, and immediately Chloe's like, I want to save my brother right now. Mm-hmm. They're like, well, we kind of need to do everything first. And she's like, nope, brother first, and basically runs off on her own. It's like, that's not a smart thing to do, Chloe. But okay.
Yeah, they're like, we knew, like, I think it's Boyce telling Ford, like, obviously that's what was going to happen.
That was expected, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she immediately runs into two soldiers, and she's drawn on them. So they're, if they do anything, they're probably going to die. She asked one, hey, where's my brother? And he's like, I'm not going to fucking tell you. You're just a woman, right? And then she shoots him in the head. It's like, looks to the other one, where's my brother?
Right. Yeah, so he's going to take her to find her brother. Meanwhile, Ford is rigging up, explosives.
Well, he slits the radio operator's throat first.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
And then starts rigging up explosives all around the radio array. And he's like, all right, Boyce, while I'm doing this, you go to the lab and deal with what needs to be done there.
We've got 20 minutes till the planes hit the beach. So, now we've spent 40 minutes getting to this point. We've only got 20 minutes left. Okay.
Yeah. And so then it just happens that, like, as Boyce is headed to the lab, he bumps into Chloe and the soldier that she was with.
Yeah. The soldier, takes her to a cell and's like, oh, yeah, your brother's in there. And as Chloe's, looking inside and sees, just the remains of something, Like, the guy tries to draw on her, and then Boyce dive tackles the guy.
Yeah. And so he gets Chloe away, and then whatever was in that cell grabs the soldier and drags him in.
Uh-oh. Boy, they better shut that door. Something bad might happen.
Yeah. And I think somewhere in here we do see the Commandant injecting himself with the syringe. In the end game of this, it's a lot of like cross-cutting between like 3 or 4 different scenes.
Right. It's very hectic.
Yeah.
You're right. He doesn't just inject himself once. He injects himself twice.
Yeah. So he's...
And then we find out his face is fucked up.
Right, yeah, we see that, like, yeah, he's all messed up from the gunshot. Outside, Tibbet and Rosenfeld have run out of bullets. They take off into the woods. We've got Boyce and Chloe. They're searching the lab.
Yes, they find Paul.
Yeah. So they get him free, and Boyce is like, you go back out through the sewer, save Paul, I'll catch up. Which, that go on without me, I'll catch up never goes well.
Nope, because as soon as they leave, Boyd goes off in a different direction, but something runs behind him real quick. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh no, that's that thing from the cell, isn't it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then meanwhile, Chloe does get Paul into the sewer grate, and she starts to go in and then gets grabbed by a Nazi zombie thing that pulls her back. And
that was the thing that was running behind her.
Yeah.
It basically chased her.
Yeah, and so she's yelling to, for him to run. And she starts running away, and she does manage to get away, but the zombie is now sort of blocking her route back to the sewer. So she's got to find a different way to get out.
Right. So, yeah, after she unloads a couple bullets into its brain, she does run off into the, unloading dock, I guess, of the facility. And she runs past this really cool sign. It says, what's that, Flammenpfeffer?
Yeah, so this is where Boyce earlier saw them, flamethrower a bunch of sick people. And there's the flamethrower. So she makes use of it and takes care of that guy that was chasing her.
Yeah. He already looked half melted anyway, so.
Right. Meanwhile, Ford is about to leave the radio area, but then is attacked by the Commandant, who is now, super Nazi zombie.
Right, effectively.
And
then, of course...
One thing he does in the fight is he it's got one of those, timer things that's, jammed into, the C4 kind of stuff, and he pulls it out and crushes it. So now we don't have a timer for these explosives.
Oh, no. Somebody's going to have to do this manually.
Because, of course.
We knew that was going to have to happen.
Right.
And then, of course, we then cut to Boyce rigging his science lab with the weird pit. And it turns out that the doctor doesn't want him to do that, so he pulls a gun on him.
Yeah, and, they end up fighting, and Boyce manages to kill him.
With his own scalpel.
Yeah.
Hoisted on his own petard.
And then we cut to outside where Paul has gotten out through the sewers, and he sees Tibbet and Rosenfeld. They're kind of ducked back behind a Jeep or something.
They're behind some rubble, but this dumb kid just runs out in the middle of a firefight, and why Chloe's not still holding on to his ass is beyond me. But yeah, they start shooting at the kid because Nazis are gonna Nazi. Mm-hmm. And Tibbet's like, fuck, I gotta save the kid.
Right.
And he does.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where he's running and gets the kid to safety and then gets shot in the back at the last second and falls down, and he's behind the protected barrier at this point, but he did get hit.
Right. But it's oh no, we've lost Tibbet. Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
But we also then cut to the Commandant, who's basically stringing Ford up at this time, and he's like, now this time I'm gonna win, kind of echoing back to that scene earlier.
Yeah, but he's not going to tie his hands up and hang him from the rafters.
No.
He's going to leatherface him and just stick him up on a meat hook.
Sometimes you're going to meat hook. Yeah, and he does, by the ribs, so that's fun.
Yeah.
We get the villain monologue at this point.
Yeah, and
it's
then...
the French were stupid for not refining the earth before we did, and it's did they really know, though? I mean... What is this ground? What is this ground?
Yeah, this weird ooze.
Right. What is this?
Yeah. And then Boyce appears and shoots him a lot, and like nothing happens. Like he just like fills him with bullets, and nothing, he's completely unaffected. But at least Boyce gets his attention, so he heads towards Boyce and starts attacking him, which gives Ford a chance to lift himself up off the meat hook.
Very painful.
Yeah. And like I think he realizes like his time is limited at this point, so he finds a syringe and injects himself. And so then we see that like the commandant is trying to drown Boyce. He's doing one of the things where like, he holds him under for a little bit, pulls him up, says some villainous bullshit, pushes him back under again. Cause they never will just hold you down until you drown. Like they gotta like make it last a while, which works out because, that gives Ford some time to kind of get some energy, and he just impales the commandant on this like big ass pipe thing, and that leads to a monster fight.
Yes, you knew. Well,
yeah.
But of course, like Ford's not jacked up on double the dose of monster serum, right? So he's not winning this fight, but he's surviving it.
So he's kind of getting like held down, and then like Ford ends up, he like sees some oxygen tanks on the ground, and he rolls them over towards the commandant, and he's kind of like looking at Boyce like,
well,
hey.
well, they kind of laugh, right? Because the commandant's like, that's it? That's all you got after all this? And he's like, yeah, Boyce, shoot it.
Yeah, so then they do a Jaws. And
they really do, yeah. It's so good. And of course, the commandant gets blown up real good.
So they're like, all right, we gotta go. And so they start to run out, and then Ford does the classic thing where as soon as Boyce runs out, he locks the gate behind him, and he's like, you go on without me.
Right.
I gotta, he's like, I'm injected now. It's too late for me. Besides, the timer's gone. Somebody's got to stay and set the charges manually.
Well, not only that, but not even our side should have whatever this is, right? So he's like the anti-Captain America that will one day go on to be kind of a Captain America.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's like, I gotta blow up with this. None of this can go back to the States.
Right.
And sure enough, he does. He blows up the whole base and himself.
Well, this is also like we get that the commandant basically isn't dead yet, and also whatever happened woke up his basically his army of Nazi super soldiers, right? So yeah, then of course, like you said, Ford does commit the final sacrifice, taking all of the Nazi zombies with him.
Yeah, and like Boyce, on his way out, he has to reset the tower timer to match up, runs out of the base, gets the cool like shit exploding behind him as he's going. In
a complete, like, it's all one shot for like, what, a good 2-3 minutes of him running?
Yeah.
And if you've seen the behind the scenes of this is fucking cool, because they are literally blowing shit up, like with the squibs and all of the other fireworks and such, like as he's running. So this is him literally running through this whole gamut.
Yeah, it looks really good. Like it's a great sort of like culmination to all this. You just see all the explosions around him, and then like we just cut to Chloe and Paul and Rosenfeld and Tibbet is alive and okay.
Yep.
And they're listening to news bulletins about the D-Day invasion.
It's going successfully. Nothing. It couldn't go any better.
Yeah.
We're gonna free Europe in no time.
And you get like all the villagers are kind of like walking out into the streets, just like they're feeling saved, like it's victory, and they're kind of just like, it's a kind of a nice little moment. And then Boyd comes like stumbling down the street, just covered in dust and blood, just looks terrible,
with a little PTSD on him for good measure.
Yeah, and they're like, what about Ford? And he's like, no, he didn't make it out.
Yep. Aw, damn.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he sits down to kind of mull over that. But we immediately cut to planes flying overhead, and now we're in a military like camp. And there's somebody talking to Boyce.
Yeah, it's like I guess a general or something. We don't really get much about him, but he's like,
officer, sometimes.
Yeah, and he's like, so I heard rumors that there was like a Kraut lab down in the basement of the church. Is there anything, anything to those rumors?
Right.
And Boyce is like,
nope.
I didn't see anything like that. And he's like, "You sure it's not worth us digging through the rubble to see?" And he's like, "Nah, we got it all. It's gone."
Yeah, that was just the base of the command tower. That's all that was.
Yeah, just a radio tower, nothing else.
Yeah.
And he's like, "All right, that's what I thought, but I thought I'd check."
Yeah, we're just gonna put you to see. We're gonna assign you to Charlie Company.
Yeah. So Boyce heads over to the rest of the crew. Tibbet is now playing cards with Paul, and they're all kind of laughing and joking together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Tibbet loves this kid now. Like, they are best friends.
And then, of course, Rosenfeld's talking about how he saved them by firing his fuck-off machine gun.
Yeah, Tibbet and they're kind of joking. He's like, I thought I saved everybody.
Yeah.
He's like, nah. And yeah, Boyce strolls up and they're like, "So what's the verdict?" And he's like, "We're headed to C Company." And it's kind of one of those like, "Oh yeah, of course they're not just going to send us home because we've got a job to finish."
Yeah. Oh shit, here we go again.
Yeah.
Right.
And like earlier in the plane, there's like Tibbet makes a joke like, I could end this war easy if they just drop me close to Hitler.
Yeah.
I'd take care of it.
Well, once we get off in Berlin, it's just a quick stop off to Berlin, and then pow, we go. Then we're heading home.
Yeah, so they kind of make another joke about that. Like that's the mission. That's what we're doing with Charlie Company is we just got to get Tibbet over to Hitler so we can all head home.
Right. Well, what they didn't know was Hitler would do it for himself. But we do go out on this really cool song called "Bridging the Gap," which is like they're sampling an old blues song and like they're adding like a rap song over it. It's pretty good.
Yeah. It's like I think it's like a John Lee Hooker song that they're sampling, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's fucking badass.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's Overlord.
Yeah. So it's the similarities with Frankenstein's Army are definitely there. This feels a little. I mean, it feels a little more real. Like the. I guess Frankenstein's Army being found footage has that going for it, where that makes it feel real. But this feels a little bit less. Like
ridiculous.
This is a little more believable that that this level of kind of experimentation would go on, rather than like dudes with giant propellers for heads.
Right. It's like in Frankenstein's Army, it was almost like Herbert West Reanimator, where he was just sticking metal parts to things and injecting them with whatever and getting it to work. Right. Where this is just a random serum that brings dead tissue back to life. Well, I guess this is a little bit more. Wait a second. This is a little bit more Reanimator.
Yeah, true.
This movie has many inspirations, I guess. But but
and it's sort of like a slightly more horrified version of like Inglourious Bastards or something. It's just like it's sort of fun fantasy to like see the Nazis get killed and stuff.
Always.
And
it's less preposterous than Frankenstein's Army as well. I mean, I like the monster like effects and design, but like you said, this is more grounded, so it's not as campy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they definitely would make for an interesting double feature. It's just that sort of like vicarious Nazi killing that like that there were so many movies like this like in like the 70s. Yeah. Well, we haven't
Nazi exploitation, is that what we're calling those?
Yeah. It does feel like sort of a revival of that.
Still good though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's only what, 5 years old?
Yeah. I would say it's definitely worth checking out. It's again, it's not a movie that's like super deep. It doesn't have a lot of layers. It's a war movie with a little bit of horror elements.
Right. Listen, you come here to see Nazis get shot. What do you expect?
Yeah. It's definitely successful at doing what it's trying to do.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, wasn't this movie kind of held? It seems like it was held onto or kind of pushed back a little bit. And
it was. There were like rumors that it was going to be part of the Cloverfield franchise, and then those rumors got denied, and it was this whole big thing. And then it ended up just getting. Did it get theatrical or did it get?
Did.
Okay.
But I feel like it wasn't a super wide release. But it was still in theaters.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
Definitely worth checking out. Yeah, it feels like it probably would have had a bigger following if it had had a bigger release.
Right. And also, of course, thank God it wasn't a Cloverfield movie. I mean, those movies are fine for what they are, but this is a little bit above that.
Yeah, I feel like if they had tried to tie the mythology from Cloverfield into this, it would have gotten a lot more convoluted, and it would have lost a lot of the charm.
Which the third Cloverfield movie, maybe it is tied in to a degree.
Yeah, because of the third Cloverfield movie, yeah, it's definitely where Cloverfield starts to lose its charm because it's starting to feel like it needs to explain itself a lot.
Yeah, and it didn't. It didn't.
Right.
But whatever. But yeah, this is a good one. So obviously check this out if you get a chance to. And actually maybe have the double feature of this and Frankenstein's Army. Compare and contrast. Let's see what happens.
Right, yeah.
Fair enough. All right, Anthony, where can they find us?
Yeah, so you can find us on, most of the socials. We're at the Frankencast. You can also find us on YouTube. You can email us at thefrankencast@gmail.com. And you can find us over on patreon.com/thefrankencast.
Definitely. Yeah, we appreciate all eyes on us. Whenever you can get there and just let us know what you think. Obviously, interact with the socials, do all that stuff. In this tumultuous time, just talk to us wherever you can. We'll talk back more than likely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Anthony, we're on a roll. We're killing a bunch of Nazis, so why stop here, right?
Absolutely.
Except this next one, I think we need to go to the sky.
Yeah. So next week we're gonna talk about Sky Sharks. Which is, it's more Nazis, but this is more like Army of Frankensteins. It's a sillier movie. It's a little bit Sharknado, a little, it's Nazis with giant robot sharks in the sky. There's some Frankenstein monster stuff in there too. So we're going to have some fun.
Would you say we're already jumping the shark?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Love it. All right. Well, in that case, to be continued.
Looks like you survived another episode. The Frankencast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velasquez. Follow us on Twitter at The Frankencast or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening.